Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Adit Sidiq Ramdhani. Now I will read the material. Everyday life in the Soviet Union, the shopping run around. The author Adit Sidiq was head of the New York Times in Moscow from 1971 to 1974. The following passage is adapted from Mr. Smith's book, The Russian, which was published in 1976 by Quadrangle or the New York Times Books Company. 1. I had heard about consumer shortages before going to Moscow, but only when we began to shop there did the Russian consumers' problems really have meaning for me. Customers the world overweight in lines, but Soviet lines have a special quality all their own. Typically, the Soviet woman spends 2 hours a day in line, 7 days a week. Personally, I have known of people who stood in line 90 minutes to buy four pineapples and 3 hours to buy 3 large heads of cabbage, only to find the cabbage were gone as they approached the front of the line. Lines can run from a few yards to nearly a mile. Some friends of ours watch a line of people in Moscow signing up to buy rubles. The line lasted 2 days and nights and ran for across through an apartment development. 2. In spite of all of this, the natural reaction of a Russian woman when she sees a line forming is to get in it immediately, even before she knows what is being sold. However, Soviet lines are more fluid than they appear. In most stores, for example, shoppers must stand in not 1 but 3 line for any purchase. The first, to select a purchase and find out its price. The second, to pay a cashier somewhere else in the store and get a receipt. And the third, to go pick up the purse and turn in the receipt. 3. But in a diary story on morning, I found out that the game is both simpler and more complex than that. I went in to buy some cheese, butter, and bologna sauce, which were in 3 separate departments, each with its own line. 9 lines. 4. Rather quickly, though, I noticed that experienced shoppers were skipping the first stage. They know what most items choose, so they went directly to the cashier for their receipts. After studying prices, I did that too. Then I went to the cheese line, the longest, probably 20 people, to get the worst over with first. I was in line less than a minute when a woman in front of me asked me to hold here, please. She darted off to the butter and milk line. The cheese line was moving so slowly that she got her butter and milk and returned Before we had advanced 3 feet, I decided to take the risk too, and I got back with my butter while the cheese line was still inch long. 5. Then I suddenly occurred to me that all over the store, people were getting into a line, holding place, leaving, retrying. Everyone was using the cheese line as home base. That was why it was barely moving. It kept expanding in the middle, so I got the man behind me to hold my place, and I went off to buy my bologna once again. It worked. It took me 22 minutes to buy butter, sausage, and cheese, but instead of being furious, I feel as if I had beaten the system. 6. This competitive shopping gives an atmosphere of tension to Russian life. People barge into stores and boom in each other with passes set in combative experience. You have to understand, said a kind gray-haired person, that for as long as we can remember, shopping has been a struggle. Life is a struggle. 7. There is hardly any effective advertising to help shoppers. Americans complain about the contents commercial in the United States, but they might reconsider if they were exposed to the customer blackout in Russia. A typical Soviet and might be, if you want to live to rip out and be beautiful, modest, truck and truthful, drunky. Most newspapers publish without ads. The shopper has no handy department store ads to help her decide where the shop. 8. Brewery is wither spread low paid 80 to 20 monthly. Sales clerks take a portion of an attractive item and sell them secretly to regular consumers who have either left a bribe in advance or can be counted on to pay a high price on delivery. Then to 15 rubles on a 60 ruble record is standard in 1976. The ruble was equivalent to 132. 9. So common is this practice that the Soviet press is always complaining about it, but it doesn't do any good. Crocodile, the Soviet humor mechanized on so at a department store employee promotions some newly arrived items. Their customer in the leather goods department, 500 imported women's purses have been received. 450 of them have been bought by store employers. 49 are under the counter and have been ordered in advance for friends. One purse is in the display window. We invite you to visit the leather department to buy this purse. Now I will reading the main idea. Main idea paragraph 1 is consumer shortages and long lines. The Soviet Union had a severe shortage of consumer goods leading to long quizzes. For example, people waiting 90 minutes for pineapples and 5 hours for chibbags only to find themselves out. Paragraph 2. The rush to get in line. Soviet cities instinctively joined lines without knowing what was being sold. For example, shoppers shoppers often needed to stand in multiple lines for a single purchase. Paragraph 3. Complexity of shopping. Buying basic goods required navigating multiple lines. For example, cheese, butter, and sauce were sold in separate sections, each with its own line. Paragraph 4. Shoppers strategies. Experienced shoppers skipped step by guessing price and getting receipts first. For example, a woman left her place in online to stand in another, optimizing her time. Paragraph 5. Inefficiency of the system. People held multiple places in different lines, causing congestion. For example, the cheese line barely moved because shoppers used it as a home base, while shopping elsewhere. Paragraph 6. Shopping as a struggle. Soviet cities viewed shopping as a competitive and exhausting task. For example, a shopper described how shopping had always been a struggle in Russia. Paragraph 7. Lack of advertising. Unlike in the US, Soviet consumers had no advertising to help them choose where to shop. For example, a Soviet ad might simply advise people to drink tea for a long and beautiful life. Paragraph 9. Bribery and corruption. Store employees secretly reserved goods for those who bribed them. For example, a raincoat might cost 10 until 50 rubles as a bribe to secure it. I think that's all for me. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.